Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on our session about providing local news in major cities and noisy media environments. My name is Hanaa Tameez. I am a staff writer for the Nieman Journalism Lab at Harvard University, where we cover journalism innovation. I'm really excited to share the stories of our panelists today, who are based in major cities around the world and who have taken on enormous challenges to start local news outlets in cities that are already burgeoning with local news. I don't have to explain to anybody what challenges local news organizations face around the world. But I'm really excited to talk to our panelists today because we are at Nieman Lab fundamentally optimistic about the future of journalism, and I think our three guests today really exemplify the hope that we can have about the future of local news. So I will talk as little as possible so you can hear from them, and hopefully we'll have time for questions from you all as well. We have with us today Mael Vallejo, who is the editorial director of Radio Chilango in Mexico City, Mexico. Christopher Robbins, who's a co-owner and co-founder of Hellgate, an alt-weekly style worker-owned digital publication that covers New York City. And we should have via Zoom Juan Andrés Munoz, who's the co-founder of Pamplonews, which is a local news service exclusively on WhatsApp in Pamplona, Spain. Before we get started, is he not here? Please hold. He's not on there? Okay, I'm going to get started with my questions, and hopefully Juan will join us later. But I would love to hear from Chris and Mael if you could individually tell us briefly about the local news landscape in your respective cities and what was missing and what made you decide to launch your outlets. If you want to start, Chris.
Sure, yeah. I'm from New York City, which has lots of different newspapers and radio stations and TV stations. And I guess, the one thing that we felt New York City was missing that it used to have a lot of, which is the alt-weekly sort of publication. The publication that could be punchy and cheeky and profane, that could really speak truth to power in ways that more traditional forms of media can't. A publication that engages with arts and culture in ways that more sort of buttoned up publications can't. And yeah, I sort of feel like, New York City used to have many examples of these publications, like the Village Voice being maybe the most famous. And it just has way fewer of them for lots of obvious reasons. It's really hard to do journalism and make money and stay afloat. So yeah, that's kind of our guiding principle, is filling this sort of alt-weekly niche for New York.
I'm Mael Vallejo. I'm from Mexico City. Mexico City is the seventh most populated city in the world. We have 22 million people living in the city and in the metropolitan area. But yet, there are not many media outlets dedicated to inform and entertain the audience of Mexico City. Also, Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for doing journalism because of the organized crime. So most media outlets are focused on national information, leaving aside the local. They're focused on getting massive traffic and the Comscore ranking, and it's a missed opportunity. So in Mexico, there is no successful business model for the media because most outlets survive by government advertising, which limits what they can report, and the subscription model is almost non-existent and only works for some niche media. So most of the advertising of large companies is centralized in media agency, which asks for bribes to give advertising to media. So it's really hard to make journalism in Mexico, not only because of the violence, but also because there's no business model, a successful business model for media outlets.
Can you tell us both, why was it? Sorry. It's like Zoom. Tell us why it was important in your specific cities to launch the local news outlets that you did, and why is it important to have that local news outlet now? Do you want to go, Chris?
Yeah, specifically, New York City is at a really interesting moment post-COVID. We have a very interesting, colorful mayor and mayoral administration, and we sort of felt that I'm going to start repeating myself, but a punchy sort of sometimes profane news outlet can really be valuable in New York City's media ecosystem. And another big reason why we started Hellgate is because we were all journalists with different but similar backgrounds, in that some of us had worked for bigger publications like the Gawker Network or Jezebel, Vice. Some of us came from alt weeklies like The Voice. I came from New York Public Radio and a website called Gothamist. And it's just really hard to find steady work with benefits and have editors and bosses that you don't despise. So we kind of just wanted to create a media company that we wanted to work at and start from scratch. And I should have noted, Hannah noted this at the beginning, but we are like worker owned. Everyone at Hellgate owns the equal share of the company. We all make the same salary. We all have the same benefits. So really just, one, interesting things happening in New York City demanded our sort of style of coverage. And two, we're all working journalists who want to keep working.
Can you, before I move on,
Yes.
Mael, can you say more about going from trying to find bosses you don't despise to being your own bosses?
Yeah. Anyone who's like, I don't know how familiar y'all are with like co-ops, but the cooperative sort of model is, it's like radically democratic. There's a lot of committees. You end up, it takes a long time to make some decisions. But I think you learn about the business side in ways that I did not when I was just a journalist focused on my journalism. And I think what's been really heartening is that editorially, I feel amazing. Like, we didn't need the sort of layers of management that we had in the past, and like trusting our judgment has worked for us. But, the learning curve is, how do we get people to pay for our journalism? How do we pay ourselves more? How do we survive? How do we grow sustainably? Those are all really difficult questions, but they're also questions that no one else has really figured out either. So I'm comfortable, taking on that sort of bigger existential challenge, as long as the editorial stuff is sound and good, and I think it is.
Okay, cool. And Mael, the interesting thing that I find about Chilango is that Chilango was already an established media brand and magazine in Mexico City for about 25 years, right? And so you guys decided to launch an entirely new medium. You launched an entire radio station. So why was it important to do that, and why the radio medium?
Sure. Chilango is a slang term for those who live in Mexico City. So there are few media outlets in Mexico City that generate community with its audience. So what we're trying to do is have a successful business model, but also trying to create community. So in Mexico, 40% of the advertising share it's on legacy media. So what we try to do by launching this radio station is to create. We are an independent media, but we don't have like that most media, legacy media, those opportunities to grow. So we take a loan from a bank. So we launched this radio station. And what's interesting is that we have grown 70% the rating of the station, but we're also very focused on growing our digital reach. So we are doing audio streaming and video streaming of all the shows in all social media apps and YouTube. And maybe for most of you that's a common thing to do, but in Mexico it's not. So we also are doing a lot of clips of these videos and audios, and we are in all podcast and video platforms, which is some kind of innovation in Mexico City and in Mexico media outlets environment. And we already have advertising from brands like Nike from their radio station. So Mexico, it's a country that really likes radio and TV shows, and not most digital brands. So we're trying to be a bigger media outlet by creating this radio station.
We now have Juan Andrés Munoz with us here from Pamplonews in Spain. Juan, we would love to hear from you about, why was it important to launch Pamplonews for Pamplona, and sort of what was missing in the news media landscape there that you decided to fill the gap.
Yes. Hi, everyone, and apologies for the technical difficulties that delayed my connection. So basically, Pamplona was, it's a city with lots of different media outlets, traditional newspapers, radios, even TVs. But there was a lack of this more modern delivery, up to date or based on current trends and media consumption trends, news outlet that was more direct, more engaging with the audience. And that's where I found this gap in the market, something delivered via messaging apps that would inform the citizens on what's relevant every day, and without all without too much, fluff, right? Like going straight to the point and delivering service directly to their WhatsApp messages every day. Particularly focusing on servicing the audience with news you can use, with things that are happening in the city that nowadays are kind of buried among many other news articles that are published every day in the papers or in the radios, and basically the population in Pamplona are not aware of things that are going on, and they think that there's not too much going on in the city, whereas when they started reading Pamplonews, they realized that there's a lot going on, and that's what we get a lot from our subscribers. That after Pamplonews was launched, they started knowing about things happening in the city, and they were able to attend, connect to other people, particularly for people that are not necessarily originals from Pamplona. This information that we publish every day allow them to engage with other people. And particularly Pamplona is not an easy city for new people. It's a very closed society. And the fact that we publish every day these activities is allowing people to get closer together and enjoy the city, whereas in the past they couldn't. So.
Juan, can you just talk a little bit about why you decided to launch Pamplonews exclusively on WhatsApp? I know you've expanded a little bit now, but when you first started, it was only on WhatsApp.
Yes. So basically, the process that I followed was, reading all the literature that was recently published and is still being published as we speak about local news and news patterns, consumption patterns, and all that. And I realized that messaging apps are critical to deliver news, and in particularly in Pamplona, and even in Spain and Portugal, because Pamplonews actually is the first news outlet delivered exclusively via WhatsApp. I thought there was like a gap in the market, and the reason why I chose WhatsApp is because it's an app that everybody has installed in Spain. In the US, it's not as big. I'm based in the US, but here WhatsApp is not as huge, at least in the general population. Obviously, within the Hispanic communities, Asian communities, it's very big, but not in the general population. But in Spain, it's basically what everybody uses to communicate every day. So being able to be in the kind of WhatsApp inbox of the audience in Pamplona was critical. Unlike email, for example, like where people open the email when they are working, maybe when they are expecting something, but WhatsApp is basically open several times per day, is consumed, nonstop. And what I wanted was to get my messages embedded within all the messages that people receive from their friends, their contacts, without any algorithm in between. Basically, a direct communication with the audience, and that's one of the keys of the success of Pamplonews, being a direct connection with the audience with no algorithm mediating the conversation between us and the audience, right?
Yeah, my next question for you guys is actually about what have you learned about your audiences and their consumption of local news and their consumption of your respective products, right? Like, is there anything that surprised you in this time that you've been working and connecting with your audiences?
Who wants to go first?
Yeah. I mean, I guess editorially speaking, we've found success with being sillier than I thought we could be, and again, I think it's just because there's much less, we don't have any competition in sort of brutally making fun of politicians in a way that only we can do, in a way that makes people laugh. And we've kind of tried to lean into that as much as possible. So I don't know, our capacity to write silly blog posts has been way higher than I initially anticipated. And that makes me happy because I like writing and editing those things as much as I also like writing and editing investigative journalism. But again, it's sort of just reinforced that our audience appreciates a mixture of coverage. So, it's good to my barometer for this is just to go to our homepage, look at the 10 articles that are there, and they should be a mixture of food coverage and a review of a record and a story about how the administration is treating New Yorkers experiencing homelessness, and then just a tongue-in-cheek blog about the governor or whatever. So yeah, just maintaining that mix, I think, is crucial to keeping our subscribers coming back and to getting new ones.
Mael, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the audience in Mexico City, as you were saying, needs media outlets that they feel close to, and they have authority on the topics that they talk about, from restaurant recommendations to coverage of social and political issues. But also, what we have learned is that soft news, soft content is no less important than hard news. Soft content is what is bringing us audience, but also advertisers, and that there are no banal topics, only banal approaches. That what our audience is asking for us is that we talk to them as they talk to each other, being less serious, less,
being relatable and conversational.
Exactly, yeah.
Juan?
Yes, in our case, we learn a ton, and actually every day and pretty much every week we learn something new, because we conduct surveys on a regular basis, asking directly the audience questions that we want to figure out. One thing we've learned the hard way, well, not the hard way, but it's proven every day, is that you cannot make assumptions about your audience. You have to actually validate those assumptions. So you might think oh, the audience doesn't like this or loves this, or well, you think that, but then you ask them, and then they tell you, and most of the times you are wrong, in your assumptions. So that's really interesting. What Mael was saying is super true for us. When you speak to your audience in a way that they speak among themselves, if you are one more member of the audience, even though you are the sender of the message or the medium, then you become one of them. You are part of the community, and that brings this closeness to the audience that makes the product stickier. And actually, the reason why we grew so much, from 0 to 12,000 subscribers within 6 months is that people find it relevant, close, and something that talks to them in the way that they talk to each other, and makes them really, really comfortable with the way we deliver news.
Okay, great. I would love if you guys could each tell us about some of your favorite stories that you think are particularly unique to your publications and outlets. Like, what are some of the stories that you guys have done that you didn't find or wouldn't have found in any other outlets in your respective cities, or any unique ways of covering things that are going on in your cities? I find Hellgate's headlines to be hilarious. I grew up in New York and I love it.
We have created a lot of news about racism. So maybe you should think that in Mexico there is no racism, but there's a lot. But there's something that no one speaks about. No, so we are focusing on that topic. Also, we are focusing on gender violence. That it's a really big problem in Mexico, but there are not many media outlets that are focusing on that. And also the water crisis.
Water crisis?
Yeah. There's a big problem, well, worldwide, but in Mexico City, it's going to be the biggest problem in a few years.
Okay.
I'll go, in terms of like our more serious fare, we reported on a teenager who was arrested for murder in Queens, in New York City. And we did a story that revealed serious investigative flaws with the police officers who did the investigation of this murder. And a few weeks after our story came out, the case was dismissed against this person. So like that was us having immediate impact, looking at a story that had been kind of raked over the coals a lot in New York City and didn't really get a ton of attention at this stage in it. And we just we went hard at it, and it was, that was very gratifying. And then, I was walking through the airport last year and I was trying to buy a turkey sandwich at JFK Airport. And the turkey sandwich was like $16, which is, it's
far
way
too
too much for a fucking turkey sandwich, pardon my language. So, I then sat down and was like, why is this turkey sandwich $16? Like, how could this come to be? And, it started as like a fun blog post of me being angry about my expensive turkey sandwich, when it turns out that there are supposed to be rules and regulations that set prices of airport food in New York City's airports. And it doesn't look like they're being adhered to. In fact, the agency in charge of the airports refused to tell me how they came up with that $16 sandwich price. And this is applied to bags of chips or whatever else that, you're stranded in the airport, you're starving, you're thirsty, you need something to eat. They're charging you $6 for a bag of little chips. I don't know, that's wrong. So I like that Hellgate is able to sort of have that duality where we're able to be, very serious in one moment, and then you can click over to a different story. And we're still serious, but we're having fun, and you can tell when you're reading our stories.
Juan?
Couple of stories that we did. We are not so much story driven. It's more about delivering the service, but we did a couple of things that I was very proud of. One was an interview with the mayor of Pamplona, Cristina Ibarrola, and in which basically we called to our audience, we did a call to action so that they would send us the questions that they would like to ask the mayor. So we went to the town hall with a list of questions. Not all of them were numbered. And basically, in order to choose the questions, we asked the mayor, without her knowing what the questions were, to say a random number, right? And we were picking the questions from those numbers. And that really worked really nice, because that way the audience was part of the process, part of the interview, but also the mayor was part of the interview herself, choosing the questions without knowing the questions, and the interview was really nice. The other one was a story that we picked up on social media. It was about this woman that we didn't know who she was, but she basically tweeted out that she was gonna take a picture while she was riding her bike, and so she stopped, left the bike on one side, took the picture, and by the time she realized she was gonna pick the bike again, the bike was not there. Basically, it was stolen. So she started running after the person that stole her bike, basically starting a chase around the city for I don't know how many minutes, but it took her a long time. She was running, shouting. Finally, she was able to catch up with the thief and recover the bike. And she told the story on a podcast with us after we picked up the story on social, and that was one of the most popular stories that we've ever run. Actually, now
Wow.
she just sent us a video about a challenge that is going on in Spain. It's called 30 days by bike, and she's become now a contributor for our citizen journalism, team, kind of impromptu team. And she's sending us pictures and videos, and she's amazing.
That's awesome. Did she find her bike?
Yes. She was able to chase the guy, actually confronted the guy, told him like, hey, why did you steal my bike? And the guy was like, didn't know what to say, but she explained it with, I mean, it was so funny to hear her. And the best part was the end of the story, because from her avatar on Twitter, we didn't know how old the lady was. And when she finished the podcast interview, she said, well, I'm 60 years old. And she was running after the guy like as if she was like 15, right? That was an amazing twist on the story, and made the audience really love that.
Local news,
Okay.
man. Amazing.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit. I have like the $1 million question, which is tell us about your business models. How do you fund your outlet, and how are you thinking about sustainability to be able to do the journalism that you do long term? I would also love if you guys could talk a little bit about like what are some of the lessons that you've learned from like existing news outlets in your areas. I think all of you have experience working in the local news environment in your cities, and how do you apply those lessons to your current outlets?
So Hellgate's business model, we are 40% of our revenue comes from subscriptions. We have several tiers of subscribers, and our top tier gets swag and gets to party with us 4 times a year, and we throw events, and it's great. And then the other 60% comes from individuals, foundations, and our goal is in 5 years that equation is flipped, and we're even we're making 80-90% of our revenue on subscriptions and 10-20% on foundational individual support. Our budget is small. It's under $1 million, just under $1 million annually, and there's 6 editorial employees and a business manager. What have we learned? I mean, coming from the nonprofit world, which I worked a few years in, I think we thought about that model, and one of the things that I've taken from it is ask people for money sparingly, but when you ask them for money, like mean it and do a good job. And I guess what that means is like we found a lot of success instead of just like bombarding people with emails every other day being like, do you value what we do? Please give us money. Which I respect that strategy. We found that if you ask people at like very sort of strategic times for help, and you're specific about why you need that help, that tends to bear fruit for us. So it's like the worker-owned model of journalism is still like extremely new. There's not very many publications like ours, and we're still feeling our way through. And it's this like weird mixture of being a for-profit business, but also being able to take money from institutions that want to support independent journalism to, like the other $1 million question is like, how do you build subscriber-funded media? And like, I don't know, we're still figuring that out.
Yeah, as I said, in Mexico there is no successful business model, and the subscription model is almost non-existent. So what we're doing is branded content for companies. I mean, that's not very disruptive or innovative, but we do not do branded content for the government, which in Mexico it's something really strange. And our audience is loyal and trust us, so that has a value for us, and but also for the brands that want to advertise with us. So we associate, as we like to think that we associate an important brand, Chilango, with another important brand, whatever which wants to advertise. So that's our business model, and it's been very successful. I mean, we have 70 people working only in the editorial part of the company, and we are thriving. And in Mexico, that's something really strange.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So Radio Chilango is owned by a larger media company called Capital Digital, and Capital Digital does the branded content, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily not the radio part.
Well, we as the editorial part does the branded content.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool. And Juan?
So in our case, we're a much smaller publication, and basically we are bootstrapping our way through profitability and through business model. When I conceived Pamplonews, I thought about it as an experimentation field, basically kind of gathering all the different sources of revenue that media outlets are testing nowadays, and try to prove them and see what sticks. So right now, the way we are making money is through advertising. Basically, we publish every day our bulletin, and we have about between 10 to 12 bullets or pieces of information in each bulletin. We have one sponsor piece within the bulletin, and that's coming from an advertiser. We try to make the content, the advertising content or the sponsor content as part of the content as possible, but also being clearly transparent about that with the audience. So that's one, pure advertising. We are working on a sponsorship or on a larger sponsorship of the whole bulletin, like per week, and that's we haven't got any sponsor yet, but we're working on that. We are also working as we speak on launching a merchandising store, because from the very beginning when we launched Pamplonews, we thought about the image of Pamplonews and the cartoons and everything, thinking about a potential merchandising business. So I've had this idea for many years about being able to subscribe to products connected to news. Let's say, for example, you launch a line of T-shirts related to news, and you can subscribe to that. So we're working on that concept for merchandising. We are also working on events, actually developing events, because one thing that we've been able to do with this large audience of 13,000 people for a city of 200,000 is that when we promote activities, people go. So we are working now on the event side, being able to do our own events and start sending people to those events and make money out of that. Regarding the advertising, one interesting twist that we are trying to develop, and we are now in conversations with several institutions and brands, is to develop this subscription model, but not for the user, but for the advertiser. Basically, like saying, okay, you have access to this amount of pieces per month, and you pay this subscription, and that's what we're working on as we speak. So those are like some of the ideas that we're working on.
Okay, great. My last question for you guys, and then we'll go to audience questions, is any advice you have for upcoming local news founders? And what can us, the folks in the room, and our friends watching at home, how can we support you and your publications now?
I guess my one piece of advice would be just to do it. If you fail and you try really hard, at least you have tried. and you'll probably have fun trying. But yeah, that was the hardest and scariest part, was just working up the courage to like jump off the cliff. But jump off, it's great. And yes, if you want to support Hellgate, check us out, hellgatenyc.com. And if you live in New York City, subscribe. If you don't, like, our paywall is pretty easy to get around, unfortunately. So read as many stories as you can before we kick you out.
Thank you. Mael?
No. I think that we have to think of local media as a really source of news. At least in Latin America, there are a lot of big media outlets, legacy media outlets, that have all the attention and all the readers. And what we're trying to do is evolving the way we are thinking about the audience as a customer that we have to satisfy, so they want to come back to us. We don't want a lot of customers. We want satisfied customers. And in a city like Mexico City, that big city as Mexico City, having 1 million readers, that's a small amount, but we are focusing on them. And I think that's the way we're working, like focusing on having really a really satisfied audience.
Okay, Juan?
Anna, would you mind repeat the question? I had a glitch on the audio.
Do you have any advice for upcoming local news media founders, and what can the folks in the room and the folks watching around the world, how can we support you?
Perfect. Yes. Regarding support, sorry, I'm having trouble again. Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yeah, what advice do you have for upcoming local news media founders?
Yes. So for the founders, I would say that it was said already, but I think jumping directly onto your ideas. I think what is very important nowadays is that technology is enabling us to do things that we couldn't do in the past unless you had a huge team. We can leverage AI, we can leverage so many tools that are available right now for project management, for launching products that they used to be very, very complicated for just individuals. So now we have the tools to do it, but we have to be very deliberate and very professional when we launch these things. Because sometimes you have an idea, you just launch it out there, and without thinking that might develop into something big. And nowadays, we don't know if something is gonna become a huge or just be a failure. So you have to be ready for both things, for being a failure and for being a success. And what I mean is that if it becomes a success, you have to have the foundations to make that success sustainable and also to protect that success. I've learned the hard way, that if you don't protect your ideas, if you have an idea that you think might work or not, you better protect it from the very beginning. Otherwise, you might have issues down the road. So no matter how experimental you become or you are, you have to be very professional with whatever you launch from the get-go. And in terms of what I would need to help us, I think just sharing what we do, sharing news in articles, talking about how you can use WhatsApp as a news delivery mechanism. I think it will be very, very helpful.
Great. So those are all the questions that I have, but do we have questions in the audience for our panelists? Yes. Do we have mics? Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jesse Beentjes. I'm an independent journalist and also consultant and strategist for local newsrooms, primarily in the Netherlands, which is a kind of a weird thing to be, but I got into it after I got very dissatisfied with working with the local newspaper in Amsterdam, which is like a daily legacy medium. And one of the reasons that I did not like working there anymore is that Amsterdam is like, it's 1 million people, so it's not like New York or Mexico City, but still for Dutch circumstances relatively big. And has like 140 different nationalities living there, and I found it odd that we were only targeting, just to say, like a in their 40s, straight, white, somewhat well-to-do couple with kids and a mortgage. And I found that we were not like paying homage to like the multiple communities and migrant communities also in the cities. And also I thought that there was a big potential there as well to, you know, like look into that, because, you know, there's also money to get there. I was wondering, because I know the New York circumstance, I know Mexico City, I can't tell about Pamplona, but those are also cities that thrive on migration and like different communities, etc. How do you look into that? Do you look into demographics, or do you like empathize with like certain target audiences and connect to them, or like do you have strategies on that?
I'll start with saying that, like, you know, that target demo sounds like it was created for and by advertisers, you know, because those are the people who buy things and buy expensive things. But, you know, our business model isn't, like, advertising is a very tiny piece of it. We are young. We just celebrated we're about to come up on 2 years. You know, part of the work we have to do is come up with an audience survey to answer some of the questions that you're talking about. Because honestly, we don't know. Like, we can make some really rough guesses, but yeah, I mean, I think as we get bigger and keep growing sustainably, like figuring that out and spending time and money to answer those questions is going to be an important part of, like, okay, our core audience here is served. How do we appeal to different groups across the city? And yeah, we're in the process of doing that.
What we try to do is something very schizophrenic, because we do some content to keep the advertisers happy. So we try to reach that upper class, but the 90% of the content we do is for the people, like regular people. 70% of Mexico City population is poor, so we know that we have to not only talk to them, but also trying to make their life better. So we do some content for the media advertisers and a lot of content for people like us.
In our case, we are not doing that yet, but because sometimes you don't want to alienate your main audience, and Pamplona is very particular in the sense that people love the stories about the city and not too much about other cultures necessarily, but because of the universities and because of all the people that come to the city to visit or either live as immigrants, and they found hard to adapt to the city, to Pamplona. We are working on a series about how to be a Mexican or how to be whatever, like a Colombian or Venezuelan in Pamplona, and how they can find the things that they value or things that connect them back to their countries in Pamplona. So that's something that we have in mind. We haven't done it yet because we wanted to focus first on the core audience, but we want to develop that type of content that caters for specific communities. We also have a community of Muslims in Pamplona, different religions as well, and we want to address that and working on that. Also, as you may know, Pamplona is a bilingual city. We have Spanish and also Basque language in particularly some areas of the region of Navarra and obviously in Pamplona, and we acknowledge the Basque language in some of our content. Is not yet bilingual, or we haven't launched the product in Basque, but we are working on that and thinking about how we can accommodate both languages.
Are there any other questions? Wherever you want. It's up to you.
Hi, my name is Vicky. I'm a freelance journalist. And I guess I just wanted to ask about if you feel that there's a different workload to working at this level with the local news organizations that you work with than if you worked at some of the legacy publications or the other media institutions that are in your cities.
It's way harder, but also way more gratifying because in our case, we're working for ourselves. So we have to wear a million different hats, and it's frustrating when I just want to write something, but I have to think about like our business, projections for the next few years and go to all these meetings or whatever. It's like a lot of work, but again, we feel good doing it because, we are masters of our own fate in that way. So I don't mind the extra work.
Well, what we're trying to do is a lot of cross content, so the things that we publish on the site can be republished for the radio station and also for the newspaper. So now we try to create less content, but better, and that can be amplified in all those platforms.
In our case, it's hard to balance. Sometimes what I miss. I never particularly worked in local news before. I work most of my career was in CNN, so covering mostly international affairs. One of the things I clearly miss is having the budgets to to do whatever we want and go wherever we want to cover things. But at the same time, I have now the freedom to basically guide the product wherever I want. So, if one day we come up with this idea to do, a new system to support our newsroom, we can focus our effort on that. If we want to do a new advertising product, we can do that. If we want to do a story that, no editor would buy ever, like in my previous life, I can do that. So that freedom to do the things that you're passionate about and that you think that work, is something invaluable for me. It's really amazing to be able to do that. So that freedom, level of freedom, and also flexibility to launch new products in a whim. Something that I was saying earlier, that technology enables you to shorten the life cycle and the sprints for developing stuff and developing new features. And now, for example, we decide to do something, and within 5 hours we have the product out, immediately, without having to go through the red tape that you would go in a larger organization.
Great. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Cindy Nanclares. I'm an independent journalist. Wondering what was one of the biggest hurdles when you first started, one of the biggest challenges or naysayers, and how do you manage, it's a loaded question, but manage to overcome some of those naysayers?
Yeah, I'll just say that the biggest challenge was convincing ourselves that we could, publish ourselves and that we didn't need like a big sort of institution behind us, looking over our shoulders. Making, again, like that's the easy part, like doing the journalism, there's lots of places that you can self-publish on the internet and people will read the work. I think someone said earlier, maybe it was Juan, it was like, the tricky part becomes how do you grow and how do you stay alive, for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and how do you manage the little success that you might get initially, and, responsibly, and spread that out over time. And again, like it's, an active question or open question is whether or not we can do it, but so far so good.
Juan, did you have anything else?
Yeah. Yes. So one of the hurdles is like a mental hurdle. Like when you're like in a small organization, you don't have the level of support or the structure that kind of forces you to push forward with your project. Some days you feel like depressed, like, oh yeah, this is not working, or you have a bad day in terms of new signups or whatever, and you think that you are going the wrong way. and that kind of demoralizes you. So you have to overcome that with no support around you, and that's really tough. In my case, also one hurdle that we had, and it was also mental, was thinking that there were already lots of media outlets in Pamplona, because you have several radios, several newspapers, several digital outlets, several TVs, and you are just a small guy, and you're thinking like, what can I bring here? What value can I bring so that the audience pays attention now that we have these attention problems, no? So just making our way through all the noise and through all the news outlets that are around us was like something daring, but we just thought that the product that we were launching was innovative, that was going to serve the audience, and we just pushed through, and it worked. So you have to overcome those negative thoughts that come to you and tell you that it's a bad idea, just scrap it, don't do it, why bother, right? And you have to overcome that. If you truly believe in your idea, just push it through, and you will have bad days, but you will overcome them.
Great, thank you so much. We are out of time, but I just want to say thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights. To those of you that are here in the room and watching online, thank you. And to the festival for giving us this space. So thank you very much.
Thank you.